Hello my friends, this is Sam from Clean Nation. Today we're going to be doing a canvas project. So we have a Yeti Bigfoot project. They're two canvases, they kind of look like they're holding hands. So one of them lives in the woods, the Bigfoot, and the Yeti lives in, I guess, snowy weather, maybe the mountains. This is a really cool project because if you want to maybe give one to a friend and then you can social distance paint together, or you can just keep both of them. They look really great hanging up together, but whatever you want to do. Another heads up, I just want to let you know that this paint is acrylic paint. Acrylic paint is permanent. It will not come out of your clothes or your furniture, so make sure that you have a covering down and a smock or maybe a t-shirt that you don't really care if it gets messy. It will come out of your skin, so don't worry. Alright guys, so I'm going to be painting with you. If you ever need more time, feel free to just pause the video and come back to me. Alright guys, so I'm going to help you set up, get comfortable, throw on some music, and enjoy. Okay, so the first thing that we have to do when we paint is set up our space. Again, this paint is permanent, so I just put down some newspaper to protect my table. We give you a placemat. I think it's just like a big brown piece of paper. You can put that down if you want some extra protection. A garbage bag will work if you just spread it out, whatever you need to do, okay? So I have a paper plate for mixing my paints. I have a bowl of water. Well, I'm using a cup. I'm using one that I can throw away so that it's easy cleanup. I have a paper towel for drying my brushes when I am done cleaning them, and I have my brushes and my canvases. Okay, so what we're gonna need for this project in particular also is a Sharpie marker. You should have one in your kit. If you don't, any permanent marker works, okay? So I'm gonna just switch over to my clean canvases here. Okay, we're gonna work on one at a time. That way it's a little bit easier, okay? The first thing that we're gonna do though is we're going to have to trace our Yeti and our Bigfoot, okay? That way you can just paint right over them later and still see the lines. All right, so I'm just gonna trace his body, his beard, his face. Okay, so after I've traced my little Bigfoot and my Yeti, I'm gonna just take one away for now so that it's a little less confusing. I'm going to work on my Yeti first. So my Yeti is this one. Okay, it's the one on the left. If you want to switch them around, you can feel free to do that. I think it might be a little bit easier though if you follow with the video, but if you like to challenge yourself, go ahead and do that, okay? So I'm gonna just take this one away, put it on the side for now. Okay? And all right, so the first thing that we're gonna have to do with this project is we're gonna just use some plain old white. Now you have a little jar of white. I have whole container. I just don't suggest using it straight from the container. You can when we're painting the plain white, but later on when we start mixing it, I would put it onto your plate. Okay, that way you have some plain white in case you ever need some plain old white. All right, so I'm going to take my small brush because I think it's the easiest one to work with right now. Okay, I'm just going to start filling in his body. Now, it kind of doesn't really make sense to paint the body, right, since our canvas is white anyway. The reason that we do that is because sometimes our canvas gets a little messy. It's from the carbon paper. Carbon paper is like our special tracing paper that we use to put the designs on the canvas. So you just want to make sure that everything is nice and even. You can also tell what was painted and what's not painted. So I think it just makes it look a little bit neater. Now if you go outside the line a little bit, it's no problem. Acrylic paint is super, super great because it covers pretty much all your mistakes up. And if you're using the white paint, it quite literally works like whiteout. And if it doesn't cover up your mistake with one coat, you can always just put two and it should work. Okay? The biggest thing though too is if you're working, let's say later with blue, and you get a little bit on his body, you want to let the blue, you want to wipe off as much as you can, but then let it dry before you put any other plain white on top of it. Okay, if you try to cover it up while it's still wet, it's just going to blend. All right, so now what we're gonna do is just do a layer of white on the ground. So I have the ground line right here. You're just gonna paint white, probably to the bottom of his feet. You can paint right over him. That's why we traced it in Sharpie. Okay. All right, and then I suggest going over to the sides of your canvas, like the edges over here. Okay, I'm not going to do it in the video just because I want to be able to just show you guys what's done on the top. But I do suggest painting over on the sides here, carrying on all the color, like the background and everything. That way, when you hang it, you can still see the color. But if you don't want to do that, it's no problem. It's all your preference, okay? All right, so now that I have the white, I want to make sure it's still kind of wet there. I'm going to take a little bit of black. Remember, a little bit of black goes a very long way. Put it onto your plate, okay? Now, I'm going to take, you don't have to wash your brush, by the way. Take a dot, so you don't really have a lot on there at all, right? I'm gonna put it onto a different spot on my plate. Then take a scoop of white and mix. Now I have a light gray. I want to make this ombre effect that's going on down here. The best way to do that is you have that white over here, right? Now let's start at the bottom with the gray. Okay, so your darkest color is going to be on the bottom. And you're going to work your way towards the middle. Now it's hard to see, but right here I don't have any paint there. So as I get closer, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take some plain white, put it directly onto the canvas, and it's going to start to blend by itself. Okay, just take a little bit more white. You see how it's starting to blend? You just want to stay in that middle area. Try not to go all the way to the top because you don't want any gray in there at all. You really just want the blending to happen in the middle and at the bottom. So start in the middle and keep dragging your brush down until it blends. Okay? And if you find that it's kind of hard to mix, what you can do is you might find it easier to take a tiny bit of water and then just dab it onto your paper towel so that your brush is a little bit wet. And if you just take that water and start moving over your paint, it should spread your paint a little bit easier. It just thins it out. So it's a little bit easier to spread. But again, make sure that your brush isn't dripping because we don't want it dripping all over your canvas, you know? All right, and now while you have some gray on your plate, actually you totally didn't need to wash your brush, so don't worry about doing that just yet. I'm gonna add a little bit more black to that gray that I made because I want it a little bit darker and I want to paint his face. So right in the center here. And again, you can just paint right over all of his facial features. You should still be able to see them. And if you can't, we'll just remake them later. Maybe you can make him sticking his tongue out. You can put a different facial expression on him. But if you spread out your paint so it's not like globbed on, it's just a thin layer, you should be able to still see that face. I don't know if it shows through on the camera, it's just super, super vague, but if I look hard enough, I can see it. And if it makes you more comfortable to just like go around what you traced, you can do that too. Okay. Now you're going to take some of that dark gray again and make these lines, okay? So they're just to kind of show texture in the snow. Actually, I need some more gray. Let's mix that. So I'm going to take that gray and make some lines. I'm only going to make a couple. Right here is good. Down here. You can add as many as you like. It's just to show some texture. All right, and now you can wash off your brush and dry it. Okay, so for this next step, you're going to want to take some cobalt blue. All right, it should be the only blue that you have. Put it onto your canvas or onto your paper plate. Okay, and we have a step to do before we move into our sky, which is our next step. What we're going to do is make this dark color down here. This is that cobalt blue mixed with a tiny bit of black, okay? So let's make that color before we do anything. I'm going to just take a scoop of that blue, put it somewhere else on our paper plate, our palette. Then just take a little bit of black. Remember, you can always add more black. It's kind of hard to take it away. It's easy to make colors darker, not so much to make them lighter. So add a little bit at a time until you like the shade that you get. All right, so this is pretty dark. I think that looks pretty good though. So I'm gonna leave it. This is gonna be my really dark blue. So we have essentially 3 colors here. We have white, cobalt blue, and that really dark blue that we just made, okay? And then we just blend them. So we're gonna start our blending process. You can switch between your medium brush and your small brush. I actually don't use the big brush at all. I just put it out in case. But what we're gonna do is start with the medium brush. You're gonna take some plain white, okay? And just in the corner here, you're going to make the corner white. Kind of like we did at the top of that snow bank on the ground. Just makes it a little bit easier to blend, okay? And now we're gonna go back in eventually and add some more white to make the moon stand out a little bit more. So if this turns into like a light blue, don't worry about it, we'll go back later and fix it, okay? All right, now I'm gonna grab some of that cobalt blue, that middle blue that I have. And I'm actually, so the white that I just painted ends right here, okay? I'm gonna leave a space and I'm gonna start kind of in the middle over here. You can paint right over that tree. It's no problem. I'll show you how to make that later. Okay, so I'm gonna make a stripe, kind of like in a circular form here, okay? And this is where you can kind of switch between your medium and small brush as you start to get closer to the Yeti. If you do get a little bit of blue on him though, it's not a big deal. We're gonna go over the white later. Like I said, acrylic paint covers a lot, so you should be good to go. Okay, you want to make it kind of about as wide as, let's see. Well, my pointer finger is going to be a little bit longer than yours, but for me, it's pretty much almost the size of my pointer finger. I'll go like down to here. So use your pointer finger to measure how big this is going to be. Again, it doesn't have to be exact. Okay. All right. So now we're going to do the same thing that we did on the ground, just with white and blue. So I'm going to just wipe off my brush. You don't really have to clean it necessarily. Take some of that plain white and just start mixing it in with that blue you just put down. It should still be wet. And if it started drying, again, you can just add a tiny bit of plain water. Make sure it's only a tiny bit though. And you're going to start moving toward that corner, that white corner. It's going to be a little streaky. That's totally okay. You can keep blending if you want it to be a little bit smoother. All right, and just keep blending outward. See, I kind of got some blue on the Yeti. It's no problem. I'm just going to let him dry. I'll go over it later. Okay, and now take some more of that plain blue. Let's make this a little bit wider. Okay, now I'm going to just wipe off my brush again. I'm going to take some of that dark blue we just made. This time, I'm going to start in the opposite corner down here. Okay, now be careful not to paint where you just painted the snow. It's going to be a little hard to see because we did paint it white. Okay, so I'm going to just do a corner. Okay, and now, you know what, I kind of want to just continue it. If you can see in my sample, I actually have that dark blue over here too. So I'm just going to outline one stripe over here. Okay. And make this a little bit bigger. And now we're going to do that same thing, that same blending process. I'm going to take some plain blue. You don't have to wash your brush. Plain blue, and start blending it in with that dark blue. Okay, be careful as you get around his arms and everything. This part you can switch to a small brush if you're more comfortable, okay? So just keep blending, going back and forth. Now, I kind of want this to be a little bit darker, so I'm just going to take some of that dark blue. Get it in. This part might take you a while. It kind of takes a little bit to get that perfect blend. Be patient with yourself, okay? Definitely took me a lot of practice. I'm just a paint professional, guys. I don't mean to brag. No, I'm just kidding. But it's like a sport. You know how you have to go to like basketball practice once a week or so? It's the same thing. You know, the more that you practice art, the better you're going to get. So be gentle with yourself and realize that sometimes this takes a long time. Okay. Oh, ooh, I almost forgot this corner over here. Just going to get over here. All right, and that should be it for the background. I'm pretty happy with that. Kind of looks sloppy in the middle here, but like I said before, I'm just going to go in and fix that later. All right, so wash off your brush and dry it. You're going to take your small brush now. All right, we're going to paint his beard, or his facial hair, I guess. Okay, we're going to take some plain white and a very, very tiny dot of that plain blue. Mix it up. Okay, I think that looks like a pretty good color. And just fill it in. You can make it as dark or as light as you want. You can make it whatever color you want, actually, but mine is kind of like just a light blue, cobalt, and white mixed together. Totally didn't make enough. Make sure that you guys make enough, otherwise you have to remix it. It's not the end of the world, it's just sometimes a little bit of a pain. You see now, the new color I made is a little bit darker, so I'm just going to blend that. Alright, and don't forget the top over here. Alright, so this looks super incomplete, I know. But what we're going to do is just set him aside and let him dry a little bit, because we have to let the background and the Yeti dry before we add anything like the snowflakes or the tree, okay? So let's put him aside, and then we're going to bring out our Yeti. Or I mean, this is our Yeti. We're going to bring out our Bigfoot while this dries. Alright, so now we're going to be working on our Bigfoot portion of the project, okay? So we're going to start with his body, just like we started with the Yeti's body. But his body is this darker brown. You should have two browns. One of them is raw sienna and the other one is burnt sienna. Burnt sienna is the darker one, okay? So we're going to start with that. The reason that we're starting with the outside of his body is that we want it dry when we start to work on the ground in the sky. Okay, so we're going to do his body, his beard, and then his face. Okay, it would make sense normally to work lighter to darker, but in this case, I just want the body dry. So the brown that we're using is a bit streaky, which means it's light. You're going to be able to see the brush, which means it's light. You're going to be able to see the brush strokes. So the paint that we're using today is light. So the paint that we're using today looks a little bit thin. You're able to see the brush strokes here. It looks very, very different from the sample. That's normal. I actually did a couple of coats of that brown on the sample. We're gonna have time to do that later. Right now you just want to put one coat just as kind of a base. And then if we make any mistakes when we're working on the sky or on the ground, we can just paint over them later. But for now, just get that one base coat in there. Okay, so now that we have the body done, you're gonna want to wash your brush and dry your brush. Okay, and then we're gonna move on to the beard. The beard is just the plain raw sienna, so that lighter brown that you have, just put a little bit onto your plate. Okay, and then you can fill in his beard, and don't forget about the face. Again, this one is going to look a little bit streaky also. We will have time later if you want to do some more coats. Otherwise, you don't have to do the other coats. This effect where it's streaky, it's actually called painterly. We say that because a lot of times people focus on making their art look like it was almost printed out somewhere, right? But we want to make it look like art. We want it to look homemade sometimes, right? So sometimes the streaks are cool because they show everybody that you made this. But again, it's all personal preference, so if you want everything to be a little bit more solid, then you will have time later to go on in and add those extra coats. I just wouldn't do it now, just in case we make a mistake. We want to be able to cover them up later. Okay, when you're done with that, you can actually leave that raw sienna on your brush. You're going to put a little bit more white on your plate if you don't have enough. I know I don't, so I'm going to put a little bit more. And then just like every other time we mix, we're going to take some of that raw sienna, put it somewhere else on our plate, and then some of that white, put it somewhere else on our plate. This is the face color. Okay, so it's kind of like a peach, light brown. Okay, you can make it as light or as dark as you'd like. I think this is looking pretty good, so I'm just going to paint. Actually, you know what? I kind of want it a little bit lighter, so I'm going to add a little bit more white. Alright, now I'm going to cover up the face. Again, you can just paint right over the facial features. I can still see my facial features. If you feel like you can't, you can just, it would make your painting a little bit thinner. Otherwise, you can paint around the features that you made, or just paint them in again later. Alright, so when we're all done with that, you're going to wash and dry your brush. Alright, we're going to start on the ground. So you can just tap his feet. Mine are still a little bit wet. I'm still going to work around them. If you want to just wait a little bit for them to dry, or maybe you can use a blow dryer and quick dry them, that's okay too. But I'm just going to work around them and just be super, super careful around those edges. So for this step, you're going to need, you have two greens. You have a light green and a dark green. The light green is called green oxide. So put that on your plate. And the dark green is called phthalo green. It looks like Phthalo. It's a very weird word to pronounce. All right, so we're going to do the exact same thing that we did with the ground on our Yeti, but this time we're just using light green and dark green instead of white and gray. So we're going to start with our light green, our green oxide. I'm going to just start painting the outline of where my little hill is, where the ground is. Again, don't forget to paint the sides of your canvas. I'm just not doing it today to save some time. But if you prefer them not to be painted, you don't have to paint them either. But you know, you can still see the sides when you hang these things up. So if you feel like you do want paint on the sides, then you can go ahead and do that. Okay, I'm going to paint this green now, pretty much until the bottom of his feet, this light green. So I'm going to get it all in here. Alright, so once I've got that light green in, I'm going to do that same thing. I'm going to take that dark green now. Start at the bottom though. Just like we did with the gray where we started at the bottom and then we met in the middle and blended. We're going to do that same thing, just with light and dark green. So I feel like this is looking pretty good. Now what I'm going to do is take that light green, put it in the middle there, and just kind of start blending. Moving back and forth. And again, if you feel like you want, like it's not blending as easily as you'd like to, you can add a little tiny bit of water. Again, this paint is kind of thin though, so remember that water will thin your paint out. So I would just try to use your paint while it's wet. It makes it a little bit easier to blend. Again, there's no real like scientific way to do this. I just kind of add the light green and the dark green where I see fit. So again, be patient with yourself. It's definitely a learning experience. Remember, everybody's is going to look a little bit different. I mean, I painted this sample, and I feel like my, the one that I'm doing right now with you guys already looks super different in a bunch of little ways. So remember that it's not going to look exact to the sample. But it's your art, so make it your art. Remember whatever you prefer, okay? Okay, Now I think that blending looks pretty good to me. So before I wash my brush, I want to add in all of these little tiny grass marks. How I do that is I'm going to take my dark green, put it somewhere on your plate, and then your dark brown, put it somewhere on your plate, and just mix the two together. It's not really a pretty color it's going to make. Mine is definitely more brown than green, so I do want to add a little bit of light green in there. Okay, that looks pretty good to me, so I'm just going to take my small brush and just add a bunch of little tiny lines to kind of signify grass. Okay, I only have them in a couple spots over here. You don't have to fill them in everywhere. Sometimes I put 2 marks, sometimes I put 3 marks, or even just 1. It might show up a little bit better too if you wait for this to dry. I might go over this again once it does dry. So I think I should have waited. Okay, but for now, I'm going to let that dry, wash my brush off and dry it, and then we'll move on to the sky. So the sky, instead of doing 3 colors this time, like we did with the Yeti, we had white, cobalt blue, and then that darker blue that we made. This time we have white, purple, cobalt blue, and that dark blue that we made. So if your paint from the last one, from the Yeti, is still wet, you can totally use that. Mine did dry up, so I'm going to just remake it. So let's do this. Let's start with white. We have our white. I have a little bit of cobalt blue. I think I'm going to need a little bit more though, so I'll put more on my plate. I definitely need a little bit of purple, so I'm going to get that ready, put that on my plate. And then I'd like to make some more of that dark blue. How we did that, just as a reminder, is a scoop of your regular blue, and then a tiny bit of black. Remember, you can always add more black. It's pretty easy to make colors darker, just not so much the lighter part. Alright, so it's a little bit darker than last time, but I don't really mind it, so I'm going to leave it. I'm going to wash off my brush and dry it. This time what we're going to do is we're going to start with the white, just like before. Plain white in the corner. Now it might make it a little bit easier for you if you take your Yeti, put them next to what you're working on now. Now see, I can see where my white ended, so I'm gonna fill in white. Then it looks like it ends here, but remember it went a little further out because we started blending, right? So I'll just make it a little bit wider. Now remember what we did where we kind of left a gap between where we had white and then that blue, and then we blended inside that gap? We're going to do that with purple this time, okay? So just wipe off your brush, put some purple on there. My white ends here, so I'm going to start down here. Alright. Now remember, you can switch between your medium brush and your small brush. That way you can get all around the Yeti. Now I'm going to put some white on my brush and just blend toward the white. Okay, so my blending on this one stops around here, so I think I'm going to stop blending around there also, so that they're even. Okay, and just kind of keep moving outward here. Add a little bit more dark purple. Alright, so now we're going to add that blue, cobalt blue. You can just wipe your brush off. You don't have to completely clean it. Okay, we're going to put that blue. We're going to leave that space, remember, between the purple and the plain blue. So this time we'll make it, I'm probably going to make it from the tip of my pinky to my second knuckle on my pinky. Again, my fingers are a little bit longer than yours, so maybe use your whole pinky, or you can just eyeball it, just to kind of make it a little easier so that you can see how big I'm making this plain blue stripe. All right, now we got to start blending. So when we have purple and blue, how are we going to blend that? I think what we can do is take that purple, just start mixing it with the blue on this side. And then add a little bit more purple, keep adding, and then just move it towards your purple. Okay. And again, if you do need to add a little bit of plain water just to help blend, you can totally do that. Just make sure that it's not dripping, because we don't want our project to get watery, but it might help you blend a little bit more. The trick is just to keep moving back and forth. It does take a long time sometimes, but that's how it blends. You're kind of just blending paint directly onto the canvas. Okay, and then I think that looks pretty good. So I'll move down here. Still have some blue on my brush, so that's why it's blending so nicely. You can also load your brush up with a little bit of purple and a little bit of blue. By load, I mean you can dip half in purple and half in blue, if that makes it easier for you, okay? Just gonna add a little bit of plain purple to help mix this. And I think that looks pretty good. So let's start with our darkest blue now. I'm gonna actually wipe this off, take our darkest blue. Again, just outline the ground. You can just actually immediately start blending over here on the left side of your canvas, because it's not really a big area. So let's just get that out of the way here. Alright, so I'm gonna add a little bit more of that dark blue. Mine is super dark this time around. Alright, and then take that plain blue, just move it right into that dark blue. See how it starts to spread a little bit? Now there's going to be a really, really big area of this medium colored blue for me, but that's okay, because remember that there is a tree that we totally covered up. But there's going to be a tree right here. It's not too hard to make. I can show you how to paint it on your own, so it's okay if you can't see it anymore. Don't worry about that. But there's going to be a tree, so you won't really notice that much about how big this blue part is. So if you can't see that tree trunk anymore, that's totally fine. I can't see mine either, but I'll just show you how to remake it. Alright, so I think this is looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with this. So, just going to add some final brush strokes here. And then I'm going to wash off my brush and dry it. Now I kind of have to let this dry a little bit, just so that if I did get any of my blue in my Yeti, once I go over him, nothing blends. So I'm going to set this aside for now. And I'm going to come back to my Yeti. I keep confusing the words Yeti and Bigfoot. Pretty similar. I guess they just have different homes, huh? Alright, I'm going to work with this on my right. Alright, so now we're going to just fill in that that tree. So for the tree, what I have is, I just use the plain burnt sienna, but I think I'm going to, for this time around, let's mix it with a little tiny bit of white. I notice that sometimes when you mix a color with white, it does make it lighter, but it also makes it a little bit more opaque. Opaque meaning that you can't really see through it. So this tree looks a little bit streaky. I'm not sure if you can see it from the camera, but it'll make it a little less streaky if I mix with white. It is going to make it lighter though, so if you like it darker, then I wouldn't mix with white. Now what you're going to do for the tree is just find a spot to start it. Let's start it right here. You're just going to take your small brush and drag to the top of your canvas. Okay? It helps if you go pretty quick. I feel like the slower that you go with straight lines, the harder it is to keep them straight. It's also, I mean, it's a tree, so it doesn't have to be completely straight. Like this has a little bit of a bend in it, but that's how nature works, so that's okay too. And now what I'm going to do is add in some branches. I want 2 small branches on this side. So you can put them wherever you like, in there. And then I have 2 bigger branches on the right side. So I'll make it in between the 2 smaller branches. this way. Okay, I'm going to add a second one, maybe on the bottom here. And then you can add little twigs. So this one I'm going to add one, and I'll add 2 little twigs coming off of this branch. Okay, so that looks good to me. I'm going to let that dry, wash off my brush. And now let's take our plain white and fill in our Yeti if we have any mistakes. So I do have some blue that goes over the body. I'm just going to cover that up with white now. You can also do this on the ground if you got any blue on the ground or you feel like it's not an even line. You can go ahead and just fix that up. Now while you have your white out, we can paint the moon. I'm going to get a little bit more plain white. So if you do have a lot of blue up here, you want the moon to be bigger, you can just take some plain white now and just make kind of like a quarter of a circle. Just fill it in, okay? And then you can add in some snowflakes. Now I did a lot of my snowflakes actually using the back of my brush here. Just dipped it in the white and then dabbed it onto my canvas. And the more that you dip, the smaller your dots are going to get because there's going to be less paint on the back of your brush. So I'm kind of adding them randomly, just all over my canvas. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me. I want to add some snowflakes also. So I'm going to wash off my brush, your little brush. Now the smaller brush, I find it easier if you wet it. Now it's damp, I dried it off too. And you just kind of pull into a point. You're gonna have a smoother, can you see? There you go. So it's more pointed now. So I find that it's easier if you just use your brush very, very lightly to make these snowflakes. What I do is I make a plus sign, like that, okay? And then I'm gonna make an X or a multiplication sign right over that, okay? And that's it. So I'll add a couple of those. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. Now I just want to add some snow on my branches. Now remember, snow is only going to sit on top of the branches, right? So the way that snow falls, it's not going to sit underneath the branch down here. So we only want to put it on the top parts, okay? So what I'm going to do is take my brush and just keep dabbing it on so that it looks more natural, like that. Okay. Now wash off your brush. Gonna let this dry a little bit more. Actually, I did forget one step. We do want to add in the little whites of his teeth. So again, you can just pull your brush like I showed you before with the snowflakes to make it pointed. And then fill in where his teeth are supposed to be. They're just little triangles. Okay, and now we're gonna let them dry. Now our Bigfoot should be dry, so we'll bring him back, or her, and we will do the same thing where we'll fill in the moon and the stars. So I'm just going to take some plain white. You can put it next to your Yeti if you want these to match. I mean the moon. Okay, and I'm gonna, for the stars, just do the same thing where I just use the back of my brush. Here, I'll show you what my sample looks like. Okay, so I'm just using the back of my brush, I'll add in the stars. I'm leaving some room for the tree as I'm working. Okay, and now we have to fill in our tree. Now, we're going to do that same thing, use the brown. I'm going to mix it with white one more time because I do feel like it makes it a little bit easier to see. But if you want it dark, feel free to make it dark. Okay, we're going to start down here. And just like before, we're going to start here and move all the way up. It makes it a little bit easier if you move quicker. Remember, we're gonna have leaves covering this one too, so it doesn't have to be totally perfect. I think that looks just perfect the way it is. So I'm gonna let that dry. While that's drying, I'm gonna take my plain dark brown and fill in his body one more time because I do want it to be a little bit more solid. Okay, so after I fill in his body, I'm gonna wash my brush off and dry it. I wanna do another coat on his beard with my light brown. Again, you don't have to. I just would prefer to. You know, I keep forgetting about these guys and their teeth, so I'm gonna go right back in, wash off my brush, and with some white I have to fill in his teeth. Remember, down here, they're just like little white triangles, okay? So I'm gonna dry my brush, do that same thing where I kind of pull my brush to a point, and then fill them in. And while I wait for that to dry, I can go on in and start filling in the tree. The tree is pretty, I mean, it looks like it's hard, but it's not as hard as you think. So how you're gonna do that is take your light green and your dark green. It does not matter if you start mixing them now, okay? You're going to just start at the top, kind of make a triangle, so just dot. Remember how we did the snow on the Yeti's tree? Just gonna kind of keep moving back and forth. Just keep dabbing it on there, okay? It's gonna kind of just get bigger as we go down, kind of like a Christmas tree if you've ever painted one of those or drawn one of those. It's gonna be like a cone. Now this one's looking pretty dark, but I'm gonna go back in with some white and tan later. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to like cover up the trunk completely. You can still see some of my trunk in my sample. So I'm gonna let that happen again where you can just see the middle, because that's kind of how a real tree is, right? If you look at a tree, you don't just see leaves, right? You can still kind of see the trunk a lot of the times underneath the foliage. Foliage is another word for like the leaves. So you can just double load your brush. Again, that means that you have two colors on your brush at once. Whatever feels comfortable for you. Okay, and I think this is looking pretty good for a base. So now I'm gonna just go in and add some spots of white. And the more that I dab, do you see how it starts to blend? You can keep dabbing, it'll blend some more, or you can just leave it. I'm gonna leave it because I think it looks kind of like a highlight. All right, now finally I'm gonna take some of my light brown and I wanna add some of that in there too. And as you paint, you can just add some more green if you want. Again, it's all whatever you prefer. So if you feel like you want all green, add all green. If you don't want that white, don't add white. It's all whatever you like. And remember, if you do make a mistake and you're not happy with it, let your painting dry and then we can go back in later and correct it, okay? So I'm gonna leave mine like this. I think he's looking pretty good. Add a little bit of white on the top there. Remember to take your time with your art. Sometimes I feel like I can do the same thing for hours on my art. Never feels done to me, but I'm gonna be done for now. Okay, so I'm gonna dry my brush off. Now we have one more step and then we're done with our entire project. So let's put our buddies next to each other. Right? This is our last step. We're gonna just outline our Yeti and our Bigfoot, and that's gonna make him look all complete, okay? Right now he kind of doesn't look finished, right? We're gonna outline. What you can do is you can wait for this to completely dry and then use a Sharpie marker if that's easier for you. But just make sure that your paint is completely dry, because if you do get wet paint on your Sharpie, it's gonna ruin your Sharpie, okay? So maybe you can use a blow dryer if that's easier for you or quicker for you. But otherwise, you can just let it air dry and come back to it. I am going to just use some black paint. I did that same thing where I kind of pulled my brush, it makes it pointy. And now let me show you something. So if you have your brush and you press down and drag, the stroke is pretty thick, right? Now watch what happens when I lightly drag. Do you see how thin that line is? Such a difference, right? So the pressure definitely matters here. This is a little bit harder though, so be patient with yourself. Using light pressure is harder. My hand tends to shake, so what I like to do is just take my 2 fingers, put them underneath my wrist here, and let my hand rest on my fingers. I feel like it steadies my hand a little bit more. Or sometimes I just need a snack. Believe it or not, snacks do help me. Snacks and water. I feel like if I don't have energy in me, my hands actually do shake a little bit more. If your hands are shaky, you can always come back to it later. Just gonna outline him. I'm gonna also get to his face and everything. But for now, I will fast forward the outlining because sometimes it does take me a long time. All right, so now that I'm done with my outline, I have 2 more steps. They're both optional. You can sign the bottom of your canvases if you'd like. I like to sign and date everything that I do so that I know the year I did it, so I can look back and see how much my art has changed. You can also add a little shine in both of their eyes. Now, a shine is just a little dot of white in the corner of each of their eyes. I think it makes them look a little bit more alive. A lot of cartoons will add these shines for that reason. Okay, and then that's it. Alright guys, that's it for today's canvas class. I hope that you guys had fun. Thank you so much for painting with me, and we will see you soon.